Welcome to Fluent Daily, the English listening channel for advanced learners at B2 and C1 level. Every episode features a rich, flowing conversation in natural English on a topic that is genuinely worth thinking about: history, psychology, science, philosophy, and more. There are no simplified sentences here, no slow speech, no vocabulary drills. Just real English spoken naturally on ideas that matter. Your job is simple. Listen. Let the language wash over you. You don't need to understand every word. Just stay with the conversation, follow the ideas, and let your English do what it's designed to do: absorb. This is Fluent Daily. Let's get into it.
What if, what if the emotion you've been relying on literally your entire life to keep your moral compass straight is actually the exact thing causing you to fail?
I mean, it sounds counterintuitive, but it's a very real phenomenon.
Right? Because think about the last time you messed up at work or, snapped at a friend. We have this habit of treating all our negative emotions like they come from the exact same generic bucket of just, well, feeling bad.
We really do.
You spill coffee on someone, you feel guilty, you miss a major deadline, you feel ashamed, and we just use these words completely interchangeable, like every single day.
Yeah, society treats it as completely semantic. I mean, people generally assume that whether you call it guilt or shame, it's just this generalized, uncomfortable psychological response to doing something wrong.
Like a penalty you pay.
Exactly, the penalty for making a mistake.
But when you actually dive into the psychological research, you start to realize that treating shame and guilt as synonyms is, well, it's kind of like confusing a mild allergic reaction with a total immune system collapse.
That's a really good way to put it.
So today, we are going on a deep dive into an emotional landscape that is, honestly, vastly more complex than just feeling sorry for yourself. We're unpacking the research of psychologists who have proven that this seemingly tiny grammatical shift, between I feel guilty and I feel ashamed, represents two entirely different psychological phenomena.
And I'd argue this is probably one of the most practically important distinctions in all of psychology.
Wow, really? All of psychology?
I really think so, because the emotion you default to, it doesn't just dictate your personal mental health. It changes your behavior and relationships. It completely alters corporate culture, and it even scales all the way up to massive societal issues.
Like what?
Well, like whether or not a criminal will reoffend after being released.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the core distinction between the two, the thing that basically drives every single downstream effect we're going to talk about today, it really comes down to the focus of your brain's evaluation, right?
Right. It's about where the internal spotlight is pointing.
So with guilt, the focus is on a specific behavior. The internal monologue is simply, I did something bad.
Yes.
But shame, on the other hand, shifts the focus entirely onto the self. So the internal monologue becomes, I am bad.
And that cognitive bridge right there is where everything changes. The person experiencing guilt is looking at their actions from the outside.
They're evaluating the event.
Exactly. But the person experiencing shame is assessing their core identity. They are no longer evaluating the event at all. They are evaluating their fundamental worth as a human being.
Let's try to ground this for you, the listener. It's sort of the difference between realizing you accidentally dented someone's car in a parking lot versus believing you, yourself, are a fundamentally broken car.
I love that analogy.
Right. Because if I dent your car, I mean, it's incredibly uncomfortable. I have to leave a note. I got to call my insurance, pay for the fix. It sucks. But the problem is external.
It's an external problem with a tangible solution.
Exactly. But if I think I am a broken car, well, there's no note I can leave to fix that. The flaw is baked right into my manufacturing.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize the mechanics of it. And that cognitive leap, moving from evaluating a temporary behavior to evaluating a permanent self, it creates a completely different physical reality in your body.
The actual phenomenology of it.
Yes, the phenomenology of shame is this overwhelming, global, negative evaluation. You feel utterly exposed, even if you are entirely alone in a room.
So what does that actually look like physiologically? Like, what is the body doing?
Physically, shame manifests as a literal desire to shrink.
Shrink, like getting smaller.
Literally getting smaller. You see flushing in the face, a collapsing of the posture, an averted gaze. The biological drive is to become a smaller target. You just want to hide, escape, or disappear entirely from the social environment. It's a pure avoidance motivation.
Which is the total opposite of how guilt operates in the body.
Completely opposite. Guilt is this localized discomfort focused squarely on the transgression.
So no hiding.
No, instead of creating an urge to hide, guilt creates an approach motivation. It creates this internal tension that actually pulls you forward into the future because the discomfort can only be relieved by taking action.
You want to fix it.
Right. You have the desire to confess, to apologize, and to repair the damage.
That physical difference actually reminds me of the early psychoanalytic observations we looked at from Helen Block Lewis.
Oh, yeah. Her work is foundational.
Because long before all this massive empirical data existed, I mean, she was just sitting with patients and noticing these very distinct behavioral loops. And she coined this term, the hidden shame spiral.
Yes, the shame spiral.
She noticed that when her patients felt shame, it rarely led to them making amends. Instead, it produced this kind of inward rage. And then that inward rage eventually radiated outward as really heavy defensive behavior.
Because they were protecting the exposed self.
Exactly. They were guarding this shamed self. But guilt, however, just led to them, trying to fix the problem.
And the clinical foresight there is just remarkable because Lewis's observations were later rigorously validated by empirical research. Primarily, the laboratory and longitudinal studies run by June Price Taney.
Right.
Taney looked at the data and found what we now call the behavioral paradox of shame.
Wait, let me see if I can anticipate this. The paradox is that the emotion that feels heavier, the one that hurts more, should logically produce better behavior, but it actually doesn't.
You're hitting the exact friction point. Taney found that shame, this emotion that feels so much more severe, the one that carries this crushing moral weight, it actually produces significantly less moral and pro-social behavior than the milder, more focused emotion of guilt.
See, I have to push back on the mechanics of that just a little.
Go for it.
Because if I'm sitting there feeling absolutely terrible about who I am, right, feeling fundamentally flawed, shouldn't that be the ultimate motivation to go out and prove I'm a good person?
You'd think so.
Right. Like, if I feel like a monster, shouldn't my instinct be to work twice as hard to show society that I belong?
It definitely seems like it should work that way. But think about the ego defense mechanism. If your core self is under attack, if you truly believe you are fundamentally unlovable or broken, your primary psychological motivation becomes self-preservation.
Not repairing the harm.
Exactly. You are psychologically bleeding out. You literally don't have the capacity to put a Band-Aid on someone else.
Oh, wow. So the brain just goes into total survival mode.
Yes, survival mode. Taney's research shows that guilt proneness, meaning a person's baseline tendency to respond to failures with guilt, is strongly associated with empathy. They see the pain they caused and they take corrective action.
But shame proneness.
Shame proneness is associated with denying responsibility, avoiding the victim, and, most surprisingly, interpersonal aggression.
Interpersonal aggression. Wait, meaning they actually lash out at the person they hurt.
They do, because the internal attack of shame is so agonizing, the psyche just cannot tolerate it for long, so it externalizes the attack.
It flips the script.
Yeah, you get defensive. You get angry at the person who is witnessing your failure, or even the person who simply pointed it out.
That explains so many arguments I've seen.
Right. Taney found that shame proneness consistently predicts this outward aggression. And this isn't just theory, We see this play out in real-world populations with incredibly high stakes.
Like the longitudinal studies on incarcerated populations, that really highlighted this for me.
The prison studies are fascinating.
Yeah, when researchers tracked inmates, they found that an inmate's tendency to feel shame actually predicted recidivism. They were more likely to reoffend.
Which perfectly aligns with the paradox.
But an inmate's tendency to feel guilt predicted successful reintegration into society.
Think about the environment of a prison, right? If the system, or even the individual's own internal processing tells them you are a criminal, well, that is a shame-based identity.
Right, I am a criminal.
And there is no action to take there. If you are a criminal, you do criminal things. But if the processing is guilt-based, like, I committed a crime, which is a terrible action, but I am still a person capable of change, that creates a pathway to repair.
And it's not just adults either. The data on adolescents shows the exact same mechanism.
Oh, the teen addiction study.
Yeah. Teens who are shame-prone show higher increases in drug and alcohol use compared to their guilt-prone peers, which honestly makes terrifying sense now.
It does.
If you fail a test and feel guilt, you study harder. But if you fail a test and feel shame, you feel incredibly exposed and flawed.
Oh,
So you reach for a chemical to numb the exposure.
that is the exact pathway. Guilt motivates you to fix the specific wrong. Shame motivates you to escape the unbearable feeling of being wrong.
Which brings up a massive logical hurdle for me.
What's that?
Okay, if shame causes recidivism in adults, right, addiction in teenagers, and makes us lash out at our friends, why didn't evolution just delete this software bug?
Ah, the evolutionary question.
Like, if it is this globally destructive to our survival as individuals, why is it present in literally every known human culture?
It's a great question. And to understand why the brain keeps this seemingly maladaptive emotion, we really have to look at the tension between the individual and the group.
Yeah.
Researchers like Jonathan Turner and Paul Gilbert focus on this evolutionary account. The consensus is that shame operates as a ruthless enforcement mechanism for group norms.
So it's not about the individual's mental health at all. It's just about keeping the tribe functioning.
Exactly. In our ancestral environment, say 50 people wandering the savannah, the absolute most dangerous outcome for a human being was social exclusion.
Right. You get kicked out, you die.
You don't survive alone. So Gilbert's rank-based theory proposes that shame evolved as an emotional alarm bell. It rings violently when you perceive that others are evaluating you as low status or unworthy or a liability to the group.
So what does this all mean for us today? I mean, listening to this, it's almost like shame is this ruthless bouncer for the human tribe.
A bouncer. Okay, I like that.
Right. It protects the club. It forces everyone to cooperate, share food, follow the rules so the group survives. But the bouncer absolutely does not care if he breaks the person's ribs while throwing them out onto the sidewalk.
The bouncer analogy perfectly captures that tension. Shame is incredibly adaptive for the survival of the collective, but it exacts a massive, often devastating psychological cost on the individual.
Yeah, broken ribs.
And the problem is that in modern times, this alarm bell is frequently triggered not by actual threats to tribal survival, but by things like chronic abuse, neglect, or even just the internalization of impossible modern standards.
Oh, so the bouncer is throwing people out of the club just for wearing the wrong shoes.
Exactly. It produces immense psychological damage without serving any actual adaptive function anymore.
And that extreme tension, this severe individual pain caused by an emotion meant to keep society functioning, that's the exact reason why shame has exploded as a topic in pop culture over the last decade.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you literally cannot discuss this topic without looking at Brené Brown. Her 2010 TED Talk on vulnerability effectively took this super dense academic framework and just injected it straight into the public consciousness.
And her contribution really changed the landscape. Brown's qualitative research is based on thousands of interviews, which provides these incredibly rich, phenomenological accounts.
That makes it human.
Exactly. It adds a human texture that strict quantitative laboratory data often misses. And her core definitions align perfectly with Tangney's empirical work. Guilt is I did bad, shame is I am bad. Her data correctly tracks that shame correlates with addiction, depression, and aggression.
But the source material also points out this really fascinating divergence between the pop psychology phenomenon and the strict academic reality. Like, they aren't entirely on the same page about what we're supposed to do next.
Right. The divergence happens when the popularization extends beyond empirical science and gets into normative, value-based arguments.
Right, like how we should act.
Exactly. The popular framework heavily advocates for shame resilience, which is the ability to move through shame without letting it define your identity. It positions individual vulnerability as the necessary precondition for human connection.
Right. And while that framework has clearly helped millions of people, I mean, undeniably, the academic literature points out a structural limitation in focusing so heavily on resilience. They call it therapeutic individualism.
Therapeutic individualism, yes. And that is the idea that the burden of managing psychological distress rests entirely on the individual.
Meaning it's all on me.
Right. It suggests that if you are feeling shame, it's your job to build a stronger shield, to be more resilient, to do the internal work.
Which kind of ignores the fact that someone is actively shooting arrows at you.
Precisely. Tangney's work, along with other sociologists, clearly documents that chronic shame is very often the product of shame-generating environments.
Environments? Like what?
We're talking about highly critical family systems, toxic corporate cultures, or environments where emotional invalidation is used as an active management strategy.
Oh, man. We've all had that boss.
We really have. And the academic perspective argues that we can't just keep telling individuals to build resilience. We actually have to treat these environments as a public health problem.
It's like that old metaphor. If you see a sick fish, you treat the fish. But if you see 100 sick fish, you have to test the water. We have to look at the societal water.
And looking at the water means examining the macro environment, human culture and language. How a society builds its social architecture completely dictates how this emotion is deployed and how it's resolved.
We actually looked at a famous historical attempt to map this out. Back in 1946, there was this anthropologist named Ruth Benedict, and she wrote a book called The Chrysanthemum and the Sword.
Right, the WWII era study.
Yeah, she analyzed Japanese culture and proposed this grand theory that the world was essentially divided into two camps. You had shame cultures, like Japan, which supposedly regulated behavior entirely through the threat of public exposure and external judgment. And then you had guilt cultures, like the West, which relied on internalized private moral standards.
It was a very neat, clean theory, and it dominated anthropology for decades. The problem is, modern research shows it was a massive oversimplification.
Because every culture feels both, right?
Yes, every single culture uses both shame and guilt mechanisms. However, the social architecture surrounding how they manage that shame differs wildly.
That's so.
Well, in East Asian and many collectivist cultures, shame is managed collectively. It implicates family honor and the reputation of the group.
Okay.
But because the group is implicated, the burden of the shame is shared, and the group often provides a structured pathway for reintegration.
So you aren't just left out in the cold.
Right. But in highly individualistic Western cultures, shame isolates the individual entirely. You are completely on your own.
And here is where it gets incredibly practical, especially for us as English speakers navigating these individualistic environments. Our culture manages these social errors through a hyper-specific vocabulary.
We have so many words for it.
We do. We have an entire architectural blueprint of words for moral self-assessment, and we rarely stop to actually think about the distinct rules for each one.
The nuances in English are fascinating because they signal vastly different social stakes, and they require completely different responses from the listener.
Let's break down the hierarchy for the listener. First, you have embarrassment. This is the mildest form.
The lowest stakes.
Right. It usually involves a public blunder, like tripping on the stairs or having food in your teeth. But it completely lacks that global self-evaluation. You don't think you're a fundamentally broken human. You just think you're clumsy.
And the social consequence is temporary. People forget about it.
Exactly. Then you escalate to humiliation. What uniquely distinguishes humiliation is that it requires an external actor.
This is a key point.
You cannot humiliate yourself in an empty room. Someone else has to be actively doing the humiliating to you, forcing you into a lower status position against your will.
Right, whereas shame can be entirely self-generated. You can wake up at 3 a.m., remember something you did 5 years ago, and feel profound shame in total isolation.
Just staring at the ceiling.
Exactly.
Then you dial the intensity all the way up to mortification. The root of that word literally connects to death. It is shame so intense it crosses over into feeling physically painful.
It's agonizing.
And finally, you have words like disgrace or dishonor. These carry the heavy weight of permanent social consequence. They imply a structural shift in how your community views you.
And for anyone listening, understanding these linguistic distinctions is a massive tool for emotional intelligence and professional competence.
Oh, completely. Yeah.
I mean, imagine you make a costly error at work. If you tell your boss you are embarrassed, you are signaling a temporary superficial blunder. You're kind of subtly downplaying it.
Oops, silly me.
Exactly. But if you say you feel ashamed, you're signaling a deep moral failure, which might actually make your boss uncomfortable or concerned about your stability.
Right. It's too heavy for a Tuesday afternoon.
It is. But if you say you feel guilty, you are signaling. I recognize the bad behavior, my focus is on the action, and I am motivated to repair it. The word you choose completely changes the interpersonal dynamic and the trust they place in you.
Language helps us navigate those everyday errors so well. But what happens when shame bypasses language entirely? Like when it moves past a missed deadline and embeds itself deep into our core identity, that is when we cross over into the clinical stakes.
And those clinical stakes are profound. When we examine major mental health disorders, shame is rarely just a side effect or a symptom. It is very often the central engine maintaining the condition.
Let's look at trauma, specifically post-traumatic stress disorder. The research highlights that shame is incredibly prevalent in PTSD, particularly when the trauma is interpersonal like childhood abuse, assault, or intimate partner violence.
Yes.
But logically, how does a victim end up feeling shame for something that was done to them?
It's a heartbreaking cognitive defense mechanism. In those cases, the victim experiences the profound helplessness of the trauma. To regain some semblance of psychological control, the brain sometimes internalizes a false sense of responsibility.
Because the alternative is just too terrifying.
Exactly. The subconscious logic is, if it was my fault, if I am inherently bad, then the world isn't terrifyingly unpredictable, I just need to be better. They feel shame about their helplessness.
Wow.
And this trauma-related shame is incredibly sticky. You can't just give the patient accurate, logical information like telling them it wasn't your fault and expect the shame to just vanish. It is deeply embedded in their emotional processing and requires highly specific therapeutic intervention to uncouple the self-blame from the memory.
We actually see a similar vicious loop in addiction, too. Tangney's research points out that the relationship between shame and substance abuse is practically a self-sustaining engine. Walk us through how that cycle actually operates, say, on a Friday night for someone struggling.
Okay, so it starts with a trigger that causes a wave of shame. The shame-prone person experiences an intolerable sensation of being fundamentally flawed. And the ego just cannot bear the weight of that global self-attack.
It's just too much pain.
Right. So to escape that crushing, aversive experience, the brain demands an immediate chemical off-ramp. They turn to a substance. But the actions they take while using, or even just the societal stigma of using the substance itself, generates a new, massive wave of shame the next morning.
Which then necessitates more substance use to escape that new shame.
Exactly. It's an endless loop. And if treatment program only targets the chemical dependency and completely ignores that underlying shame engine, the cycle almost inevitably restarts.
The literature also specifically highlights eating disorders here. Many researchers classify conditions like anorexia and bulimia, quite literally, as shame disorders.
Because the clinical profile of these disorders perfectly matches the phenomenology of shame we defined earlier. You see intense global negative evaluation, specifically focused on the physical body as the manifestation of the flawed self. You see immense concealment and hiding behaviors, and you see these ritualistic cycles of transgression, which in this context is the act of eating, followed by extreme, often physical penance like restricting or purging.
So how do you treat that?
The most successful treatments are the ones that realize they aren't just treating food behaviors. They are treating a profound, embodied experience of shame. They have to introduce self-compassion to break the cycle of punishing the self.
So synthesizing everything we've explored on this deep dive, words really do matter, not because of semantics, but because they reflect the reality of our internal architecture.
Absolutely.
Guilt is the localized discomfort. It's the tool that pushes you forward, that helps you apologize, that helps you repair the world and stay connected to the people around you.
And shame is the global self-attack.
Right. Shame is the evolutionary bouncer that makes you want to shrink, hide, or just lash out in anger. And knowing the difference changes everything about how we operate.
Which leaves you with a really fascinating question to consider as you step back out into the world.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Well, we talked about how shame evolved as an enforcement mechanism for small ancestral tribes of maybe 50 people, right? Where social exclusion literally meant death.
Yeah, the savannah.
But think about the scale of the modern world. Today, your tribe includes the entire internet.
Oh, man.
Right. What happens to the human psyche when the evolutionary alarm bell of shame is triggered not by a tribal elder, but by a faceless algorithm of 8 billion people designed specifically to maximize outrage and public exposure?
That is terrifying.
We are running ancient tribal software on a global digital network, and we are just barely beginning to see the psychological toll of that mismatch.
It really makes you wonder if our brains were ever actually built to process the weight of the entire world's judgment. Well, something to think about. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.